to Exploding Word Ministries. My name is William Andrews. Today I want to talk to you about a miracle which also gives us a great demonstration of faith. So let's talk about it. You'll find it's in Matthew 14. It started in verse 22, goes on to verse 33, and the story is about when Jesus is walking on water. So before we start into it though, let's find exactly what happened. How did it lead up to it? And what do we learn from it? So let's start at the beginning. The day before, Jesus had been feeding the 5,000. I know, it sounds strange just to do that like that, but there had been a revival meeting. Loads of people, up to 5,000 men individually had come to hear Jesus teach. Now, when we say individually, it's because the Bible specifies that it was only 5,000 men, but that it didn't include women and children. So, working simply on a mathematical equation, if you simply add one woman and one child, there may have been more children, then you would get a minimum of about 15,000. Now, taking those sort of numbers and realizing the quantity of food that would be required to provide a substantial meal, and that's what it was a substantial meal for the people that were listening, because they had been with him for some time. It's necessary to understand that this is why this miracle is so great. Let's look at this miracle for a moment. Jesus said to the disciples, I'm worried about the people. They haven't eaten for a while. Let's get them something to eat. The disciples throw a tizzy. Well, you would. They've got no money. They say, it's going to take a fortune to actually feed these people. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to feed these people when we don't have any money? Well, that's okay. Everything's fine. Jesus says, we'll see what you have. So they went out. Quick investigation. They discover that there's only one person there with any food. He's a young lad. He brought some for himself. He's a forward thinker. He's in the zone. He figured he might get hungry. So he brought himself 4 small barley loaves. Now, small barley loaves are basically what we would call scones for all intent and purpose. They're not all that big. They're just enough for a boy's lunch. And 2 small fish. Now, we're not talking sardines here, but we're not talking cod or pillar. We're talking a small fish, nothing too big. Now, these particular things were there. That's all he had. It wouldn't be what you would call a meal. It's not something that would fill someone up, an adult. But yet this was all that was available to the disciples. So when they go and have a discussion with Jesus, they said, all we can find is one young man here who has 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But was that among so many? Jesus said, that's okay, bring it up here. He takes the 5 loaves, he holds them up to God. He asks God to bless them. He does the same with the fish. And then he starts to divide the bread, tearing it into pieces. And he gives a piece. Just tear it up in half and give it to a piece to each disciple. And he does the same with the fish. And he keeps handing those out like this here. And he says, go, distribute. So they do. They head off. They're distributing all this food. And before long, there's 5,000 people plus fed. But the disciples didn't quite get it. So Jesus said to them, go now among all the crowd and collect anything that wasn't eaten. Any fragments, anything. People, too full, I couldn't eat all that. That was brilliant. Just go and collect that. Bring it back here. See how much you got. So they went and they had big baskets and they went out and they discovered that they had 12 basketfuls. The 12 basketfuls from this small boy's lunch had left uneaten out of all this multitude of people. That was an amazing evidence to them that a miracle had happened. Yet, had they fully grasped it? Had they fully understood it? Not really. After Jesus had completed this miracle, he decided that he would send the people back to where they all belonged, go home in other words, and he would separate himself out for a little private time, prayer with his Father, recharge his batteries, that sort of thing. And it's when he's doing this, he says to the disciples, you go on ahead of me to across the lake, and I'll join you later. You go on ahead. So he compelled them to get into a boat. Now, the Bible uses that expression, compelled them. In other words, he gave them a direct command. Don't wait around for me. Go. Go now. This is the time to go. So that's what they did. They literally obeyed what he was saying to them. They went. Now, here's the interesting part. As they're out on the Sea of Galilee, heading across to the other shore, the sea's approximately 6-7 miles wide. And they're not quite halfway, but they're getting towards it. When they hit a storm. Now this is a major, major storm. It's the like of it they haven't experienced before. But they're not overly concerned about that because they're fishermen. They've come from a good background. They understand the way these things go. But they're down the sail, they're on the oars, and they're trying to make a progress. But the storm is hitting them with such ferocity that they're not going anywhere. They're literally becalmed. In a storm, I know it's not sunny, but they're literally, the more they move forward, the more they're being pushed back. So they're going nowhere, they're staying where they are. We're told that Jesus spots them from where he is, sees them in trouble, but he doesn't actually come towards them to help them until the fourth watch. Now the Romans had this tendency to break a day or a night into a set of 4 watches. Each for 3 hours, and so we know that the fourth watch is the watch up until 6 o'clock in the morning, which is when it all changed. So this was from 3 to 6, this watch. So we're in the middle of the night. It's time, and disciples are very, very, very tired. They've been rowing all night. They've been trying to get to where they were told to go to meet up with Jesus. The storm won't abate. They're at their wits' end. And all of a sudden, they see a man. He's walking on the water. He's coming across the waves. Their natural reaction is they're seeing a spectre. They're seeing some form of supernatural manifestation, and they're terrified. Now, I know the Bible actually states in different places that it's a ghost, but if we go back into the Greek, this word spectre seems to cover the ground better, because they're literally saying, now we're saying things that can't really be true. Therefore, it's a spirit of some description. It's some sort of illusion. So they're not happy. They're a bit upset. So what happens is very simple. Jesus shouts out to them, "It's okay, it's me. Don't have to panic. I'm not a ghost. I'm real. I'm coming over." Now, if we read Matthew's, this story is in Matthew, Mark, and John. In Matthew, we have Matthew, it's in chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. In Mark, it's 6, verses 45 to 52. And in John 6, it's on 16 to 21. But in Mark's version, it looks as if Jesus was going to bypass the boat. In other words, it was never, Mark is bringing across that it was not Jesus' intention to attract attention to himself. But it was only because the disciples were becalmed that they noticed someone walking beside it. But this was a fierce storm that was going on. This was not a calm night. This was a major tropical storm, if you like. But here's the interesting part. In Matthew, we have an additional bit of the story which isn't in John and it isn't in Mark. And that's the bit we want to concentrate on today. You see, that additional bit of the story is all about Peter. Because what Peter does is an example of great faith. Peter says, "If that is you," when Jesus responded that it was him, "then give me a command. Tell me to come meet you in the water." Now, let me explain this. From the Jewish mindset, Peter needed to have some form of evidence that this was not a spirit that was trying to deceive them. So therefore, he was giving it something that he knew it couldn't do. It couldn't give him a command that it could substantiate. So when he's saying to them, command me to walk on the water. If the Spirit said, come, yes, he would have to try it to see if it was true. But only if he could walk on water could he accept that this was truly Jesus. No other spirit could allow him to do that. Nobody else could allow him to do that. In other words, no deception could do it. Now, as Jesus steps out, as Peter steps out, get confused with all these characters, as Peter steps out of the boat, he immediately finds the water under his feet is like solid ground to him. He's amazed. He begins to walk towards Jesus. He's watching Jesus coming towards him. He's going towards Jesus, and the storm is still bellowing all right. So he's going up and he's going down, and he's moving with the ground. A bit unsteady at times, as you would be. Imagine them, stuck on an earthquake, for example, when your footing gets moved. So it's a bit strange. But then Peter looks away. He begins to look and consider where he is. I'm in the middle of the sea. I'm in the middle of the ocean and there's a storm here. I'm in the middle of the ocean and there's waves almost as big as myself splitting around me here. And he began to sink. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. The moment he took his eyes off Jesus, the moment he began to consider what was going on around about him, that was when he began to sink. He started to shout out, Jesus, help me, help me. And immediately Jesus put forth his hand, grasped Peter's hand, and said, it's okay. But he then said to him, why did you doubt? Why are you so little faith? And ironically, that's the only part of the story that we often hear, Peter's lack of faith. But let's put ourselves in that picture. How would you feel if you were the one who were walking on the water to meet Jesus with a storm and you started to sink? Why did he sink? Well, he sunk because he lifted his eyes of Jesus. He stopped trusting in Jesus. And that's what we have a tendency to do. We stop trusting in Jesus from time to time. Now, why we do that? We let the influence of this world and all the things that are around us begin to impact on our lives. We begin to take what we see and what we hear and what we're experiencing and all the scary things that are happening in the world, like job and money and houses and wars and famine and disease, and we begin to think that those can affect us. All those things can affect within the normal, natural life. But if you are living in Christ, you are living in a spiritual relationship. And because of that, we have a God who is able and fit to meet all our needs, to protect us from all the storms we come across, to even enable us to walk on stormy waters. And that's what we have to do. And that's what I wanted to bring across today. Now, this is one of the first of these little Bible talks that I'm hoping to do. Therefore, it's a little staggered at times. But the concept is that we'd like to be able to literally come across, have these, we're going to look at the parables, we're going to discuss them, we're going to do it from the ordinary person aspect rather than quoting you Bible verse by Bible verse. But we want to look at it and explain it in simple English, simple, ordinary find. I know, me being from Northern Ireland, simple English sounds a wee bit strange, but those things do happen. So, we'd like to thank you for your time, for being with us. This is William Andrews from Exploding Word Ministries. Until the next time, goodbye.